Yeah, let's see. Okay, we're recording. All right, so here we are. I have no idea what number this is, but this is December 1st. My goodness. And I think this is like session 21 or something like that. It's 22, something like that. So have we ever done a book in only 22 or less than 25 sessions? I don't think we've ever done a book this quick. So we're doing really well. All right, we are on page either 86 or 87. Do any of you remember last week, did I read about Brother Lawrence?
Yeah.
I thought
Yes.
I did. I thought I did. Okay, good. So that means that page 86 is done. So we are starting on page 87. Now remember what he's doing here. He was talking about and contrasting prayer of the heart with prayer of the mind. And then when he got to prayer of the heart and prayer and ministry, he broke down prayer of the heart that actually in terms of engaging it in your life or in your ministry, that there were three ways that this discipline of praying in the heart on a daily basis would be manifested. And it was that the prayer of the heart is, this is on page 80, the prayer of the heart is nurtured by short, simple prayers. The prayer of the heart is unceasing, and the prayer of the heart is all-inclusive. And so we went through the first two, short, simple prayers and unceasing prayers. And the unceasing part, we ended with the little primer on Brother Lawrence, because he was the master of the unceasing prayer, of being aware of and present to God's presence in everything that he did. So now we're going to hit on page 87, this idea of all-inclusiveness. And for me, this one was the most enigmatic of the three. So we're going to have to maybe do a little bit of deciphering about what he's talking about in some of these paragraphs. So before we give Frank the microphone, did anybody have anything that they needed to discuss from last week, or something that is absolutely burning on your mind right now? Or we jump in? Going once, going twice. All right, Franklin, you're on.
Final characteristic of the prayer of the heart is that it includes all our concerns. When we enter with our mind into our heart and there stand in the presence of God, then all our mental preoccupations become prayer. The power of the prayer of the heart is precisely that. Through it, all that is on our mind becomes prayer.
Okay, hold right there. So does that ring true for you? Does that seem right to you? When we enter with our mind into our heart and there stand in the presence of God, then all our mental preoccupations become prayer. All our mental preoccupations become prayer. The power of the prayer of the heart is precisely that through it, all that is on our minds becomes prayer. Yeah? Everything that's on our minds becomes prayer?
I think what's in your head is what you're trying to get rid of, not that it turns into a prayer.
Okay. That's one of the first things that jumps out. Absolutely.
But I think the idea here is that if you turn on the heart, like if you think through the heart, then it's transformed into a prayer.
And I think that's exactly what he's saying. So William, can you give us a scenario and how that works? I mean, what if what's on your preoccupying on your mind is really negative stuff, negative self-talk?
Well, I mean, I'll use the example of, my mom, which I've used in here before. I have noticed more and more that when I have clarity of judgment, like when I understand what is the pathology and what's going on, with that clarity comes judgment, usually for me. And following my judgment could be, I notice it probably more often when it's a negative judgment. And then following that, I feel annoyed, et cetera, et cetera. But if I remember to think with my heart, then it transforms, it diffuses my judgment completely. It turns my judgment my judgment is irrelevant. And what's relevant is the relationship and the connection to this person. And if I just remember to pray with to think with my heart, I can totally see that as a form of prayer. I can totally see that as a form of presence, because it would move me into an interaction with my mom, even though all of the things that have annoyed me 10 minutes ago are still there. But now that I'm approaching it from this heart place, then, everything just seems lighter and different and easier to manage, essentially. I never thought of it as a prayer, but I can go along with that easily.
Mm-hmm. I really like what you're saying. Can you help us? And what does it mean to you to think with your heart? Can you give us a little bit more of an experience or a definition of what that means?
So, for example, what I've found annoying about my mom, and what all of my siblings find annoying about my mom, is that like every time she sees you, she wants you to do something for her. And she wants to complain about something that we've addressed before. And that complaint is, well, like the situation with the house. It's a situation she created. It's a messy situation. And she doesn't take any responsibility for her building the bed that she's now sleeping in, basically. And again, if I think of this logically, if I think of what the facts are, I get annoyed at her. If I think through my heart, I recognize that she wants to interact with her kids, and the only way she knows how to interact is to complain about something. But she wants to have a relationship. She wants to have a connection. So if having a relationship means sitting there and listening to her complain about something, that's what it is. And but I have to be thinking with my heart to move into that space. And then I can listen to her complain. And once the complaints go by, then other things begin to show up, so I just find myself less annoyed by certain types of interaction. So even doing stuff for her is spending time with her, and, just hanging out with her. And I know, even though there are things she can do for herself, but she's really asking me to spend time with her. That's why she's asking me to do some whatever. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if I think about this logically, like today, she wanted me to come and help her schedule a ride to go to the doctor on Friday. And I know she can schedule a ride without my help. She's done it 1,000 times. She called me on the phone to talk to me, to call the person to schedule a ride. So I know she knows how to use a phone and talk on a phone. So, you know what I mean? But I know that she just wants me to come downstairs and hang out with her for a bit. And, the what becomes irrelevant. And, going back to one of your things, Dave, the how becomes the only thing that really matters, So I can have those types of moments with her, and they're good moments. They're good moments if I like this idea that truth can only be known in the heart. Truth can only be experienced in the heart. The closest the head can get us there is perspective. And, so I like that idea of, trying to live from the heart, as just as a way of viewing the world and viewing other people. And even when I'm viewing somebody, like we were talking about last night when Jerry was talking about what was going on with her daughter, recognizing that somebody who is anxious and irritable and so on and so forth is still somebody who wants to be loved. And they're frustrated because they're not loved the way they want to be loved, and yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with it.
So it sounds like thinking with your heart is first identifying with the other person, finding that common ground, seeing, stepping into their moccasins, seeing the world through their eyes and through their circumstances or whatever, so that you can develop a common ground. In other words, move from the duality that your mind creates, all the judgment you were talking about, to a unity. So thinking through the heart is going to be unitive. One of the notes I made is that the mental preoccupations become prayer when we become aware of these connections in real time. And it's kind of exactly what you're saying. That's why I wanted to dig in a little bit, because we throw some of these phrases at things and they don't mean anything. They mean something to us when we're saying them, but they won't mean anything to the hearer unless we kind of dig in a little bit. Because just like Tony reacted, all our mental preoccupations, those are the things in contemplative prayer that we're trying to step away from. So how in the world do they become prayer? Well, they become transformed when we think with our heart, when we find the connection points in those moments. And therefore, they wouldn't be negative anymore. Because like William is saying, he's seeing the same activity or seeing same things that annoyed him and his mother, but now they've been transformed into a chance for connection. And so it's the same stuff, but you're not seeing it the same way, and you're seeing the task within the task. Like Richard Rohr likes to talk about, that there's connection within these surface activities that don't mean anything in and of themselves, but they have deep significance when you use them in the way that William's talking about. So that's how I exactly was starting to parse this, because I had the same initial reaction that Tony did. I said, wait a minute. This stuff we're supposed to be stepping away from, but I can see how that can work. Is that making sense to anybody else, or anyone else have anything else to maybe make the point a little finer?
I don't think I can make it finer, but I mean, I agree with and can understand what William just explained, and you also. Maybe it's semantics for me. I wouldn't go from the mind to thinking with the heart. I don't know, I think it would need to be said different than, because it takes too much digging from his words in the book to understand that. And I think William demonstrated that, the way in which, he did bring out his understanding. And like I said, I totally get what you're saying. But like, I think it's just semantics for me.
But I also think that, like, I use my mom as an example, but like if you're in that space, like what's her name? Nina. One of my favorite Nina quotes is, God shows up disguised as reality. And if we view God in everything, as part of our daily reality, and just remember that, just staying in that space, then everything that's happening, everything that's going on, every thought that's popping in and out of your head is all part of that single cause. It's an expression of that single cause that's just echoing out through time and space. I think it's kind of like a Brother Lawrence kind of thing, where you can have these glimpses of moments where everything just is alive, everything is present, everything is like, everything shows up. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
Everything belongs.
Everything belongs. Yeah. Everything belongs.
Another one of Richard Rohr's books that we read through years ago. So, okay.
It makes sense what you're saying, William, because I you gave me a perfect example of thinking through something that was happening to me yesterday, which was not a good day for me. And I think what was happening is we had some family squabbles and some people were flying off the handle at each other and all this. And I think now, in kind of sitting back and looking, I think, for example, my sister who is a very controlling person, she's feeling maybe now a little less valued because now we have a different caregiving situation coming in. So she's happy to be relieved, but she's maybe acting out because she's now no longer needed as much as she was before. And so there was a lot of snapping, and she was biting heads off and blowing a gasket, and we were all wondering what the heck is going on and why is she snapping at everybody, and she's kind of ruining this moment, kind of a thing. So if I stand back and look at it from that perspective, that's probably what she's doing. It didn't make me feel any better. I didn't like it because, we're all overtired, we're all exhausted, and I tend to be the kind that sucks it in and just holds it in, and she gets to blow the gasket. Well, why does she get to blow the gasket and I have to hold it in? So I got kind of resentful. I got kind of mad about that. So I had to step out of those shoes and say, okay, this is something else going on. This is something else that she's going through, maybe that I am not understanding, and now I do. So I'll cut her a little slack, I guess.
Oh, Kathy, you needed to be with us last night.
I wish I was.
That's
God,
exactly
I
where
would have
Jerry
rather
took
been
us
with
the
you
whole
than where I
evening.
was. So trust me.
As the
Yeah.
peacemakers, of course, we're going to cut him a little.
See,
slack.
that's just it. And so we get the ulcers and suck it in because we just hold it all in, and everyone else gets to blow their gasket. Well, I started feeling resentful. Why does everybody else get to blow a gasket and I have to hold it in all the time and keep it together?
Because
I
if you
don't want to
blew a
keep it together.
if you blew a gasket, you'd feel even worse, right?
I would. I think
That's
I would.
the whole bottom line. I mean, we're still pleasure-seeking missiles. We're just doing it in the way that our number on the Enneagram, is the easiest way for us to do that. But I think what this paragraph is really pointing to is that when we can make this transition from descend with the mind into the heart, then our awareness of these things actually does transform them. So you're not feeling the resentment anymore. You still realize the dynamic of what's going on. You're still going to do what you think is right to do, which is not to blow a gasket. But now that that self-awareness and self-control that you're exerting doesn't feel like it's a restriction anymore. It doesn't carry the same resentment anymore. It's just what you're doing within that particular circumstance. And so we get the relief, but in a different way. So I think that's where Nouwen is going. And it's certainly where I'm going to believe he's going, because that makes sense to me and helps me.
One other quick thought on this. This might not be directly related, but I was having a conversation about, I watched this podcast the other day. I think it was Jordan Peterson that was talking about the virtue of being a difficult person. And he basically said that difficult people get what they want more often, certainly, than easy to get along with people. If you have a difficult person in the room and an easy to get along with person in the room, the difficult person is probably going to get what they want more often than the easy to get along with person. And as a peacemaker, we fall into that easy to get along with category. And what can often happen is we forget what we want. And part of this process, at least for the type 9, is to kind of, it's not showing up in a selfish way. It's showing up as, okay, I'm here. Like, this is what I want. And it matters as much as what you want. And a lot of times people who know what they want, we might develop a resentment against them because they got what they want, because they spoke up and asserted themselves more and we didn't. And, and then we end up having a beef about that. But, knowing for the type 9, like knowing what I want and standing up for what I believe in, and even having a little bit of an argument over what my wishes are, is how I show up. And it's a good thing. It's a healthy thing, you know. And I had a thought tying it back to this, and it went away.
That's okay, buddy. But I will say this about that. If we really do make a practice of descending with the mind into the heart, what we begin to want is always connection, which is a how and not a what. So it's going to change. We're not going to feel like we're not getting what we want because we're the easy to get along person. We are going to be getting what we want because we're going to be getting increased connection and increased relationship, which is the only thing that
Yeah,
really matters.
but sometimes, you know, we want Thai food as well instead of Italian. You know, and the relationship is all good, but if I really want Thai food and every time dinner plans come up, I don't get to have Thai food, I might begin to feel a certain way about that.
Oh man, it's all going to be poo in 8 hours anyway. Who cares?
Can I read something from the scripture?
Sure.
I just before this session, I was on a session and we were studying Proverbs, which I had not really, I mean, it was pretty amazing, but chapter 23, verse 7, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. So to me, that is along with what we're saying. If I'm thinking and we're in my heart, then that's what's going to come out. And then verse 19 says, hear thou my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in this way. So I thought that was interesting. It's funny because we were just studying Proverbs, and then I went and looked for that. And you know, I can't tell you all how much last night helped me. You know, I did a lot of thinking and praying and, you know, so forth, and then studying this Proverbs. And so I really like this reading that I have to come from love in my heart and what I'm thinking. If I go and see my daughter and I'm thinking and expecting criticism, or I'm expecting, you know, her issues or her conditions or whatever, then I'm setting myself up for them. But if I can go with, in my heart, love, and recognize that she wants love as much as I do, and she wants this relationship as much as I do, I can come from a different place. And I think it will, as it does with your mom, will, you know, I think that can be a beginning.
Yeah. And even if it's the dry twigs we're starting with, you know, it's a beginning.
It's a beginning.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's venture into another paragraph.
When we say to, to people, I will pray for you, we make a very important commitment. The sad thing is that this remark often remains nothing but a well-meant expression of concern.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes.
Oh man, he just nailed it right there. You know, I become very aware that if I say I will pray for you, or if someone asks me if I will pray for them and I say yes, that I actually do take the time to either just to be silent and just acknowledge that, you know, because it's so easy to say that and it just becomes meaningless. And I don't ever want I will pray for you to become meaningless. But yeah, that's a big cultural thing that we do as Christians. All right.
But when we learn to descend with our mind into our heart, then all those who have become part of our lives are led into the healing presence of God and are touched by Him in the center of our being. We are speaking here about a mystery for which words are inadequate. It is the mystery that the heart, which is the center of our being, is transformed by God into His own heart, a heart large enough to embrace the entire universe. Through prayer, we can carry in our heart all human pain and sorrow, all conflicts and agonies, all torture and war, all hunger, loneliness, and misery, not because of some great psychological or emotional capacity, but because God's heart has become one with ours.
Okay. Is that making sense to anybody on first pass? So that first line, or the second line, when we learn to descend with our mind into our heart, then all those who have become part of our lives are led into the healing presence of God and are touched by him in the center of our being. Can someone riddle me that? What's he talking about there?
Sounds like a catch-all net. Like God is so big, it's just this big net that catches everything. But is it really personal when you're praying for one person or 10 people? I mean, it just sounds so big.
I got a call the other night from a friend from undergrad. I've known her since we met in 91, 92, somewhere in there. Anyhow, she was just diagnosed with cancer. And I almost never say this to people, but I said to her, I'm going to pray for you. And she said, fuck off. Like, and it was deserved because it was like, as I was saying it, it didn't sound like something I would say. And I was praying for her in my heart, and I don't think I would have consciously sat down and put aside 2 minutes to say a word prayer necessarily. So this idea of, like, as she was telling me about her struggles and learning about the diagnosis and so on and so forth, it was like, it was right in my heart. Like I didn't need to say that, and her response was, perfect for her. And it highlighted something that it felt like a phony moment to me, and she called me on it. And it was just perfect. And I think this seems like it resembles where I should have been, instead of saying, let me pray for you or something like that. In fact, I asked her, would it make you uncomfortable if we prayed together or something like that? And she said she wasn't interested in that. But she's a spiritual person and believes in God and so on. But something about that act, I guess, at that moment didn't feel right for her. Yeah, that's what I got from that.
But if we are really allowing our mind to descend into our heart, then, words are really not included at that moment. I mean, to really be with our mind and our heart is to be purely experiential at that point, purely connected at that point. And so it's not about the words. It's about something deeper. This line that when we do that, then all those who have become a part of our lives are led into the healing presence of God and are touched by him in the center of our being. How are they touched? See, on first blush, it sounds like this is some kind of supernatural thing that's going on, that suddenly they're going to be touched by God because we have done something over here in our corner. But what I really think that's happening here is they're touched by us. They're touched by our presence. They're touched because we are in connection with God's presence and God's spirit. And through us, we're going to be connected. That sense that we are God's hands and feet. And we are the ones who are carrying out his will. Your kingdom come, your will be done, as in heaven, so on earth. Well, how does that happen here on earth? Well, it happens through us. And so I think that I don't know that this is where Nouwen is going. Some of these paragraphs here in this section, to me, were totally open to interpretation, which is why I'm spending time with them with you, because I'm not sure what he meant exactly. And this was written in 1981. And like I said, his later books don't read the way this one does necessarily. And so I don't know, but in terms of how I'm interpreting it, so that there's something that I can walk away with that can help me, this is where I'm kind of understanding it. He talks about it being the mystery with which words are inadequate. The mystery that the heart, which is at the center of our being, is transformed by God into his own heart, a heart large enough to embrace the entire universe, to be able to include all the suffering and sorrow that we read about on the news, that we see within our own community, that we feel in our own home, that we feel within our own being. All of that can be included and part of our experience. But I think it has to do with our awareness expanding. You know, it doesn't just, our awareness isn't just close about our own heads so that it's only our own issues and needs that are really being considered, but that it opens up and keeps expanding until it does encompass the entire human experience. We can actually do that through God. And at the same time, do it in such a way that we don't burn out. You know, it's so important to understand that when Moses looks at the burning bush, it's on fire, but it's not being consumed. We can burn with God and not be consumed if we really are standing there with our mind descended into our heart. If we're doing it under our own power, if we're doing it through our own conscious mind and worrying and thinking about it, we're going to make ourselves absolutely insane, and we will burn out and experience that compassion fatigue in no time at all. But if we're doing it in the flow of the Spirit, then we can continue, and it's not going to feel that burden, just like Kathy was talking about, feeling the resentment of trying to do the right thing in a family situation, but to do it not just in your mind, but actually through your center. It changes the experience. And I think this is the kind of thing that he's talking about. At least it's the kind of thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's like the connection is the prayer. You know, when I go out and for my walks in nature, you know, that connection is all a prayer. If I encounter a homeless person, that's a prayer. I don't feel like I need to have words to pray, but my compassion and just the presence because of who God is in me. I carry that. And so I just really see, if I remain isolated, then I think that gets stunted in me. That's what I notice. So for me, being out there is really important for flow and health, you know?
Perfect. Perfect. Any other thoughts on this? We lost our reader here for a second. There he comes, out of the blur. Okay. Next page, Frank.
Here we catch sight of the meaning of Jesus' words, "Shoulder my yoke and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Yes, my yoke is easy and my burden light." Jesus invites us to accept his burden, which is the burden of the whole world, a burden that includes human suffering in all times and places. But this divine burden is light, and we can carry it when our heart has been transformed into the gentle and humble heart of our Lord.
Okay, so there's another one that's kind of counterintuitive, right? How is it that we can carry a burden like that? That would be light. And he says we can carry it when our heart has been transformed into the gentle and humble heart of our Lord. What does that really mean? How can we, I mean, we have all talked about in here, and we have all experienced, and many of us have finally said, we just can't watch the news anymore. We can't be that involved in the 24/7 news cycle because it is carrying such a weight, you know, and so much negative input that it is just, you know, it's burning us out. It's overwhelming our senses, you know, but that seems to be what he's talking about, that we can include all this stuff, but then it's somehow going to be light. It's somehow not going to overwhelm us. Yeah. How do we do that? What does that actually mean? Yeah. I'm thinking what it means is that we're going to be aware of and carry this burden, but without the responsibility to fix it, You know, it's not having the responsibility, we need to fix it, but to be aware, to be a witness, to be present, to do, and then to be available to do what we can in the moment with whatever presents us. But kind of like Danielle was saying, the connection itself, the awareness of the presence too,
Can I call you as soon as it's over?
is the
Thanks. Sorry, guys.
is the connection itself. And so without that mental responsibility of trying to figure it out, get our arms around it, come up with solutions, try to fix, that's what makes the burden heavy. But to be present to the human suffering and just connected to it and available to help how we can, that's a different way of carrying it. I think that's what he's after here. So it makes sense to me.
I think I experience a whiff of that in my clinical sessions. Like
Yeah.
I can listen to people's problems and the most tragic physical, sexual abuse, et cetera. But if I feel like a good connection with my client, it energizes me. Like I can walk away from a good session where, I got choked up, or something like that. And it's like, wow, that was a good session. Like, I felt something. I was present, I had a heart experience. And one of my clients once asked me, like, how do you listen to people's problems all day? And I think the way I do it is through the connection itself. Like, it's just, if the connection is not there, like my worst clients are like I have this one 20-year-old whose mom sent him to therapy and he doesn't want to be there and doesn't have anything to talk about. And it's like I'll ask questions and we'll have these 40-second silent pauses before he responds. I find that exhausting. But with the clients who have problems and stuff to talk about, it's energizing and engaging. And I almost always run over time. I have a half an hour schedule between each session because I always go over time because there's always, engagement like that. And I don't think of it like carrying the weight of the world, but, I can carry, I like that beginning scripture there. Like I can yoke with my clients and help to make their burden light. Yeah, I think that's a good way to think of it.
Which you can only do if you're yoked to God's presence, because that makes your burden light. And I think that's really where he's at. We love because he first loved us. It's the same sort of idea here. But I love that analogy because I've experienced the same thing in many sessions. It's if the connection is established and just being present. Sometimes, there's some clients that present to me, because I'm counseling and not therapizing, but there's not a whole heck of a lot that I can do. I remember this one person, everything I suggested maybe she could try, she'd already thought of and she'd already done. There was nothing to give her, but we still parted, and her feeling that something had transpired.
Right.
She felt her burden lifted. I think it was just by the connection and just by being able to talk to someone, and maybe being reaffirmed that she had taken all steps that were possible at this point, in the situation. But yes, I can walk away feeling lighter as well. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's what he's talking about here.
And I can relate to that with my Al-Anon, as a sponsor. In fact, the call I just got, the connection. If I can make a connection with somebody in the program that has called me to talk, I'm a pretty good listener, and I do more listening than the thing that I had to learn is that it wasn't my job to fix it, because I'm a fixer. And so and then I lose the connection, because they're not necessarily asking me to fix them. They just want somebody to talk to. They want somebody to sound off. And I can share my experience, and strength and hope, as we say. But in the beginning, I had to learn that I didn't need to fix them. You know, I didn't have to, that wasn't my job. That wasn't what, you know, that I did much better and maintained a better connection if I just listened and shared any experience that I could relate to them. So that I can relate to it that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's great.
I don't know about the whole world, taking on the whole world, but
Yeah.
in my little community,
Mhm.
but I also think that last night is a perfect example of the connection that all of us that were on last night, you made with me, is an example of, you know, I felt the connection from all of you, and you weren't trying to fix me. You were just trying to share experience with me and thoughts with me.
Mhm.
And, you know, things that you had thought of or you had experienced. I think that was a good example of it.
Mhm.
I think what we do every week, coming together
Mhm.
and establishing a connection with all of us, you know, and knowing it's a safe place for us to share and a safe place for, and that you all are not going to, you know, we're not going to try to fix each other, but we are going to listen to each other, and we are going to listen with our hearts.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that the image, the figure of this prayer that we're talking about that's starting to come out of the mist as we talk more and more, is that it is a very different approach to prayer. You know, it's as Danielle said, the connective approach. It is a unitive approach. It's primarily a wordless approach. It is being really, really present, aware, present, connected, and any of your action or words flows out of that connection rather than is trying to establish it in the first place. Maybe, you know, William's "I'll pray for you" fell flat because it wasn't flowing out of the connection. He was trying to establish something. And man, we're always there. When you get hit with someone's problems in such a way, you want to be able to say something. You want to say something that'll make it better, or at least make yourself relevant in the situation, right? And then that's when we, you know, put our foot in our mouths and trip all over ourselves. If we could just remain silent and connected, then something is going to flow out of that that'll be organic and will actually be more healing.
Mhm.
But it's a very different approach than we are normally used to. And it's not a head-based approach. You know, it's not logical. You know, it's not rational. It doesn't have, you know, the sequence to it. You can't put it in bullet notes. It's going to be led with the heart, led with presence, and what flows out of that. So,
Mhm.
Okay, let's read a little more. Here we can see the intimate relationship between, excuse me, prayer and ministry. The discipline of leading all our people with their struggles into the gentle and humble heart of God is the discipline of prayer, as well as the discipline of ministry. As long as ministry only means that we worry a lot about people and their problems, as long as it means an endless number of activities which we can hardly coordinate, we are still very much dependent on our own narrow and anxious heart. But when our worries are led to the heart of God and there become prayer, then ministry and prayer become two manifestations of the same all-embracing love of God.
And I think that paragraph just re-says what we just were saying, right? I think that he's using different words, but saying the same thing. To worry a lot about people and their problems with an endless number of activities, which we can hardly coordinate, that's staying within the ego and dualistic framework, right? We're trying to divide and conquer. We're trying to make all these things happen, and we're working under our own steam. But to turn that around and get out of our own narrow focus and move into the larger embracing, that's the unitive focus. That's leading with the heart, letting the mind descend into the heart, leading with that connection first. And then the whole nature of the thing starts to change. I think that's exactly what he's talking about here.
Yeah, David, let me try to make this relevant to what was just read, but in my past, I had so much empathy for people's struggles and their plight, primarily homeless. You know, I had the food bank at the Effect for a lot of years. Was on the board of this Someone Care Soup Kitchen, the Children of the Americas, as you know. And my heart was into that. I felt so much love, compassion for all those people. Here in Santa Fe, there are a lot of homeless people. They're out on the street lights, begging for money. I don't have compassion for those people anymore. I don't feel empathy anymore. My head understands that, whatever took place in their life that brought them to where they are today, whether it was mental illness, physical, I don't know, they lost a job, gave up on life, whatever it may be, I don't have that compassion anymore. I don't know where it went to, but I can, when I watch television, let's say, when there's someone in a moment, having felt love or were loved, I can feel that and it chokes me up. But I don't have it anymore with the people on the street, the people that are trying to find a place at 40 minus degree weather here. And, they go through that every day. But before, I would do whatever I could to assist them, whether it was, trying to feed them, give them a buck, give them a jacket, whatever it may be. But I just don't have that anymore. And I don't know where it went to or why it left. So,
there's one thing I can say then, and just something to kick around in your own head, is that when I walk, because I was with you step for step when you were doing all that work, for what, over 10 years with the Effect and with the other organizations with which you worked. I mean, I watched you pour your heart into it. You worked so hard. You were running around, you were taking meetings, you were arranging deals for refrigerators and freezers and food and going to Second Harvest. I mean, you were everywhere at once doing all this work, and you're in a different space now where that's just not possible. I mean, you're not going to be able to do the same thing that you did back then physically, and mentally. It was exhausting then, but it would be more exhausting now. I think you're in a transition period where you're now in this new space. You're seeing some of the similar needs, but you realize, I think at some level, that the way you responded before it's not possible for you to respond now. And so there's going to be another way for you to respond and connect, but it's going to be different at this stage in your life, perhaps. But maybe that's it. You're just in flux right now. You're in transition, and there's going to be.
It feels like it's too big for me.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's my point.
It's too much. It really feels like it's just way too much.
So there will be another way you will find another way to respond. The compassion isn't gone, but I think the initial reaction is, I can't do what I did before, so I'm not going to do anything at all. I mean, I just know how hard you worked back then, Tony. And there's going to be a different way for you to do this.
But yeah, I go, where'd it go?
Yeah. And it won't be necessarily fixing their problems, but you will find a way to witness in a different way that'll create the connection and the impact. I mean, Danielle, just going out to the park and talking to these people, that was a gift that worked for her and worked for others. And so she found a way to connect and give something to these people that they desperately needed. So you'll find a way. So I guess I'm saying, don't worry about it, but be aware of it, continue to be aware of it, and continue to be present and see what happens. Yeah, but that's a really interesting insight that you have about yourself right now.
It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
As I was hearing Anthony share and even Danielle talk about like talking to the homeless and so on, it never occurs to me to like you feeding people at the soup kitchen and so on and so forth. It's like never crossed my mind once.
You do it in a different way though,
I suppose.
And that's the beauty of it. We're all going to do things in a different way. We don't have to beat ourselves up if we don't think about, feeding at the soup kitchen. That that's not necessarily the way that we are going to play this out. But if we're just practicing this mind descending into the heart kind of connection, awareness, and presence, what happens in the moment will be just right. You know, even if it's just eye contact, just acknowledging someone else's existence, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but it flows from that space. And then we can take the burden off. I think that's another part of what Jesus' burden is light and the yoke is easy, because there isn't all of this duty and responsibility and obligation. It's going the other way. It flows out of the connection that we feel. And, you know, that's part of, I think, our problem as Christians. If it feels too easy, then we think we're doing something wrong. But if we are flowing with the Spirit, that flow, I think Danielle was talking about the flow. Yeah, it's gonna feel different. And so it's just getting used to it, getting used to a different way of connecting. So at any rate, I think we'll just stop there because we're already at time. We've got just a couple more paragraphs in this section and then a conclusion and an epilogue. So, and as I was reading through before our session tonight, I realized as we get into the conclusion and the epilogue, there's not a real lot of discussion that needs to revolve around it. We can probably read through it pretty quickly. So we'll see how far we get next week. We only have two or three more sessions before the 15th. How many do we actually have? I should know this stuff. Today's the 1st. Oh, we only have 2 more after this. So if by instance for instance, if we finish the book next Wednesday, then the last Wednesday, we're just going to read some more stories from the Desert Fathers and Mothers, and then round it out with that, and then we'll be done for the year. And then we need to figure out what the heck we're doing in 2022. So, yeah.
Did we talk about book ideas at this point?
We didn't. So maybe be thinking about any ideas that you might have that you think you want to tackle in 2021. I had someone ask me about the possibility of, we had done some modules on the development and transmission of scripture, the Jewish Jesus. And so someone was asking if we can do some of that again. I don't know if that appeals to you all, or we just find another book, but yeah, we need to come up with something. So be thinking about that. And we'll kick that around too in our last couple of sessions and come up with something. And then we can be communicating by carrier pigeon, email and text and stuff through the end of the year and figure out what we're going to do. Okie dokie. All right. Scott, can you close us in prayer, please? Pastor Scott, can you close us in prayer?
Yes,
please?
Pastor Scott.
All right.
Pastor
Sorry.
Scott.
The pressure's on.
Well, Father God, thank you that we can come to you with these thoughts and these ideas that we have, and know that if we press in and really seek your heart, that your heart is always to take care of us and provide for us and care for us. Lord, thanks for your love. Thanks for your compassion. Thanks for your heart for us. We pray for those people that are homeless, Lord. Pray for the people that, all the people everywhere, divorce and loss of jobs and income and homes, and so many different challenges people are facing. We just lift up each person that we encounter before you and ask that you give us the words and the heart to serve out of love and compassion, whatever is appropriate at the time, whatever we can provide, that you'll give us that heart to do so. Thanks for hearing our prayers. Thanks for taking care of us. Thanks for your heart for us, Lord. It's in your Son's precious name we pray and give our thanks and say our amens. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
See you
Thanks, everyone.
Sunday, one way or another.
Night.
All right. Good night.
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 Good night.
Bye, Jerry.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Jordana. Thank you for praying for me. I do
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
That's great. All right. Good night, Jerry.
Good night.
Good night, Jordana. And
Good night,
Linda.
Dave.
Okay,
Good
see
night,
you-
Linda. I'll see you guys
See you
Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday. All
Yep.
right.
Bye.
Bye.